Good morning. Welcome to our webinar on lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. My name is Ulrich Genschel. I'm a head of sector in the European Commission in DG RTD, working on the simplification of our processes. And together with my colleague Andrea Kikosch, I'm going to lead you through this webinar today. There's going to be three parts. We have 2 hours to explain and discuss lump sums. In the first part, I'm going to give you an overview that's going to take maybe 40 minutes to take you through the life cycle of lump sum grants and where they differ from traditional grants. In the second part, we have 3 guests which already have experience with our lump sum grants, and we are going to interview them, and they're going to share their experience so far. And then we have still plenty of time, I hope, to answer your questions using Slido. Now, the Slido session is accessible through the tag EC lump sum, no spaces. You'll find that information also on the event page on the portal. And when you enter questions in Slido now or later on, I encourage you to focus really on the mechanics of lump sum funding. How does it work? What are the pitfalls? What do you need to watch out for? And of course, also put questions to our guests asking about their experience, specifically anything you like to know. That is the focus of this webinar. Second, if you see questions that interest you, do not enter the same question as much as possible, but rather vote up existing questions, because we are going to go through the questions in the end by the order of popularity and the number of likes each question got. So with this, no further ado, let me start explaining. Let me start going through my presentation. Well, one more general remark on lump sum funding. The whole setup of lump sum grants in Horizon Europe was designed to be as similar as possible to the grants as we have been running them for many, many years. So the number of changes was limited to the minimum necessary. So here we are really going to focus on where lump sum grants are different and not cover all details of the entire project lifecycle. That would not be possible in a webinar like this. With that, why are we using lump sum funding in the first place? Well, if the old system had been ideal, had there been no problems whatsoever, then of course we wouldn't have introduced any novelties, any changes, but there are. What we found is that the traditional system is really prone to errors. It's very complex to use. So there is wide agreement that we need to reduce the errors that come from using actual costs. And lump sums are one key measure to do so, because they are, and that's the second point, they are a lot simpler to use. There is no more cost reporting. There is no more timesheets. There is no more recording and reporting of the resources. So this is a big source of errors. And since this source of errors doesn't exist in lump sums, the error goes down and they are a lot easier to use. Let's remember that the actual costs themselves, they are subject to rather complex rules. If you look in the annotated grant agreement, there's dozens and dozens of pages which explain the details of actual costs and all the rules that you must follow. All of that doesn't apply anymore to lump sums, and all these complex rules were rather difficult to follow for many of our participants. And then lastly, we are really hoping to focus more on content. With the actual cost system, with the traditional grants, we think, too much focus on financial management, but obviously the aim of Horizon Europe in itself is not to spend money, but is to reach objectives in science, in innovation, in research. But spending money is a means. It is not the financial management that is at the core. What we want to see is, of course, that everybody focuses on what's actually happening in the project and what's coming out of these projects. Here I'm going to give you some data to emphasize the point I just made about many of our beneficiaries not really being equipped to deal with actual costs. In this graph, you see the distribution of the 42,000 unique beneficiaries we had in Horizon 2020 and the previous framework program. And you see that on the right-hand side, a tiny share of these beneficiaries had 100 grants or more. These are the big universities or big research centers. And then on the left-hand side, you see that the vast majority of our beneficiaries just had one grant in the framework program. Now, that picture was exactly the same already in FP7, and we have no doubt it'll be the same in Horizon Europe. So the vast majority of our beneficiaries have maybe 1 or 2 grants in 7 years, and we cannot expect them to have dedicated EU offices or administration or lawyers that really get to grips with the complicated rules of actual costs. So they need a system that works the first time they use it. And here, lump sums, we believe, are a lot better than actual costs. We started this whole endeavor in 2018, and since we've been aware, of course, of quite some concerns, which is maybe not surprising if you look at the history of the European Research Framework Program that has been using actual cost-based grants for virtually decades. So everybody got used to it, especially all the big stakeholders. They are, in fact, dealing with this system quite well, and they don't really have any problems and they don't have many errors, as opposed to the smaller ones and to the newcomers. But so they told us about their concerns that it would be more work to set up a proposal, that there would be less flexibility in managing a lump sum grant and to adapt to changes as necessary in the course of the project. And maybe even most importantly, they were afraid there would be a higher financial risk. In other words, there would be a risk that they would not be paid for their work in lump sums, while they were relatively certain that they would be paid with actual costs. Now, in our view, we've of course taken this seriously and we've looked into that, and we have not found any evidence for any of that. So maybe to clarify some misunderstandings, the details, the budget details, I'm going to talk about that in a minute a bit more, that you need to set up a lump sum proposals are equally needed for actual cost grants. The only difference is that you do not need to share them with us in the proposal, but you do need to have them and you need to keep them on file equally. So the difference is by far not as big as some might want to make believe. And secondly, when it comes to payments, I'm not going to go into details here now, but well, we've seen that the vast majority of the lump sum payments that we've done so far were going through in full without any deductions. And of course, also in an actual cost grant, there is the possibility to cut the grant. It's, in other words, to say there is no higher risk in a lump sum setting than in an actual cost setting. Well, and of course, there is the idea that in actual cost grants, beneficiaries would have fewer obligations and would therefore be certain, and that the reimbursement of participants happens independently of one another. But that is really a myth. In an actual cost grant, just like in a lump sum grant, we expect consortia to collaborate. The members of a consortium are not independent of one another. They are responsible to collectively implement the grant. And there is, of course, theoretically the risk that the failure of one or few members of the consortium lead to problems for the whole consortium. Now, this is for the whole consortium to sort out and to manage. What we see in practice, that financial damages from this are really extremely rare, both under actual costs and under lump sums. So this is, in our view, nothing to be afraid of, if properly managed always. So practically, lump sums have been introduced in 2 flavors. In a type 1, where we fix the lump sum in the call for proposals, so the applicant would go for exactly that amount. We've been using this mostly for small projects, and now there is only one call left currently. That is the ERC proof of concept, which hands out lump sums of 150,000 euro to demonstrate the results of ERC projects. And then we have the type 2, which is really the workhorse, which is also what I'm going to be talking about now, mostly in my presentation, where you define the lump sum in your proposal. That is the system that is really closest to the way of working as you know it from actual costs maybe. You define the budget, you define the lump sum, you justify it, it gets evaluated, and then we agree upfront on the lump sum. So type 2 is what I'm going to focus on. Now, when you write a proposal, I've said it in the beginning, we tried to do to mimic and to copy as much of the system and the processes that are in place for traditional Horizon grants, meaning here, for example, you use exactly the same application form. You describe the project and the methodology and the work exactly in the same way as in any other grant, and you describe the activities in each work package. That is so far no difference whatsoever. What is different is that you need to add a detailed budget table, which includes a detailed overview of the cost estimations, of course, because you don't know the exact costs up front, but you make the best estimates that you can, and you provide them to us in this detailed budget table. The template is available as an Excel file in the submission system, so download it from the call page when you see the when you submit your proposal. Be sure to use that version and not maybe a version that is circulating. Otherwise, there are, of course, versions from previous calls. There's also, for information, a version on the portal under the reference documents. Make sure that you use the version in your topic, in your call, because that might have been adapted specifically to the needs of that topic. When you write a lump sum proposal, as I mentioned, the key difference is the detailed budget table and the cost estimations for each cost category. So what we see in this table is a breakdown of cost estimations for each beneficiary and for each work package. So the estimations I mentioned, we cannot expect them to be accurate to the euro because they are upfront estimations, but what we expect is that these cost estimations only contain costs that would be eligible in any other grant. So they must only be eligible costs. They must be in line with your normal practices, like how you normally plan the budget of an R&I project. They must be reasonable and non-excessive, and you'll see that is for us the key criterion to later evaluate the lump sum budget. We want to be sure that the overall lump sum we sign off is reasonable and non-excessive. These are the key words. And of course, like in any other grant, the budget proposed must be in line with, and it must be necessary for the activities you propose in your proposal. So with all that, you enter with all these estimations entered, the budget table will automatically generate a breakdown of lump sum shares because, well, you entered the cost estimations per work package and per beneficiary. The table will calculate also taking into account the funding rate for that particular topic and for that particular participant. So it'll all take this into account and then come up with a breakdown of the lump sum shares, 1 share for each work package and 1 share for each participant. So, and of course, also the work packages are broken down. We'll again see this later in an example. And of course, we'll have the final lump sum that comes out. And this is what you then enter into the formal budget of your proposal. Of course, make sure that you read the instructions which are part of that Excel table. And you can also find more details on how to fill in this budget table on the Funding and Tenders portal. Now, one more word on the specificities of lump sum proposals is the design of work packages. Now, primarily, as I said, there's no difference. You cut your project into work packages as always. However, since we pay lump sums on completion of work packages, again, we'll see later how that works, you are allowed to split work packages of a long duration such that they can be paid earlier. Now, what does that mean? That sounds complicated. An example is shown on the next page, but well, before I get there, what the message here is you may cut work packages in order to optimize the cash flow, let's say, but there is no obligation to do so. This is really up to the consortium to split work packages if they deem necessary to do so in order to optimize the cash flow in their project, in order to be able to be paid for activities at the end of each reporting period. But for example, if you have a very high pre-financing in projects where you have 80% pre-financing, this may not be necessary. And in that case, we encourage you to not split and just work with the 80% pre-financing and have no split work packages because it's not needed. But the decision is up to the consortium. We inform the experts that they should not penalize projects for splitting work packages as long as the resulting work plan still makes sense. There is not a plethora, there's not a huge number of tiny work packages that don't make sense as work packages anymore. So we still like to see that work packages are a sizable, a significant, substantial part of the project, and the structure of work packages in the work plan makes sense and is effective. Now here, as promised, is the example. What could be split? What could it look like to split a work package? Now at the top you see a single long work package. For example, for project management, we very often see a work package that lasts the entire duration of the project. That's plausible because you need to do project management from start to finish. So here in this example, you have work package 1 for management going through the entire 4 years of this project. Now, in this case, if this was a lump sum project, you would only be able to be paid for the project management work at the end of the 4 years, because this work package is only finishing after 4 years at the end of the project. This would be in a lump sum project the time when you can get paid for it. If you like to design your project in a way that you can get paid at the end of each reporting periods. Now we have here 3 reporting periods, standard reporting periods, 18 months is the standard reporting period, and applying the rule that we want the minimum number of reporting periods. We have 3 reporting periods here, 2 times 18 months and once a year, 12 months. In order to get paid for project management work at the end of each reporting period, the work package was split in 3 parts, each lasting exactly the duration of 1 reporting period. And in this way, the work can be paid at the end of each reporting period, provided the work package was complete. In terms of volume of your proposal, let me mention you don't need to repeat the description of your project management 3 times then. You could imagine you do a copy-paste 3 times. That's not what we like. You can, of course, in a case like this, just describe your project management the once, maybe the first time it appears, and then in the second and third occasion here, simply refer to the description of the first work package. But formally, you have 3 independent work packages which can be paid independently at the end of each reporting period. And let me repeat, we don't want to see like a triplication of work package. So it's not a good idea to do a project design as normal and then multiply it by the number of work packages. You should really do this, use this measure, where needed, in order to keep your cash flow up and running to the degree that is needed, also taking into account the pre-financing you get. Now, you have submitted your lump sum proposal. It's going to be evaluated. Again, a lot of what's happening is going to be exactly the same. We are using the standard evaluation criteria, excellence, impact, and implementation. And so far, the evaluation is no different whatsoever. We are going to look, you remember the one difference in your proposal was this detailed budget table, and we're going to look at it under the implementation criterion. And their experts, I mentioned before, they will make sure that these estimations are reasonable and non-excessive. Also, our experts, they cannot know the costs by the euro, but they can certainly get an idea whether the overall package and the allocation between beneficiaries and work package is reasonable. And if not, we are encouraging them, we're asking them to make concrete recommendations how to modify that budget. That could be to shift budget between beneficiaries, to shift budget between work packages, but it could, of course, also be to reduce estimates if they are considered overestimated. If so, we'll provide the recommendations and the information in the evaluation summary report such that the changes can be done during the grant agreement phase if the project is selected for funding. Now, the good news here is if your budget needs certain changes, needs certain adaptations, this is not going to lead to a decreased score. We find this is normal in a lump sum system. Not every last cost estimation might have been properly justified and might have been really convincing, but this is not going to lead to we're not penalizing such projects with a decreased score. This is another maybe small difference to actual cost grants where any shortcoming would lead to a decreased score. So if you have a situation like that in actual cost grant, chances that the actual cost grant proposal will not pass the evaluation are higher because there it would lead to a decreased score. In a lump sum situation, it doesn't. We would only decrease the score in a lump sum situation if, well, essential information is missing. Let's say the budget table is only partly completed, or it is otherwise unfit and like it is a flawed budget, really not fit for purpose, far away from the project. But even a number of changes to cost estimations would not lead to a decreased score. So don't worry on this account. What the experts are using to judge your personnel costs, which after all are a large part on average in our grants, 2/3 around, or maybe nearly 2/3 of the budget in the end is invested in research and innovation personnel. We provide them with data from Horizon Europe showing what are normal personnel costs in each country and in each organization type. Now, we know, of course, that across Europe and beyond, in third countries and the rest of the world, personnel costs vary a lot, easily by the factor of 10 or more across Europe. So to give our experts an idea what normal personnel costs in the program are, we take data from signed grants and put them in a dashboard to give them a statistical significant view of what is normal, and we show the range between the 20th and the 80th percentile. Obviously, in other words, there is grants with lower personnel costs and there is grants with higher personnel costs. What is shown is each time how many person months are funded at a given rate. And you see here in this example, I get pretty significant differences between research organizations in 2 different countries. Now, of course, experts can resolve this for all other countries and all other organization types we have. And we encourage them to check if higher costs are really justified. Here, the idea is if, let's say, a university from a given country is a lot more expensive than universities from that countries are normally, in other words, in our other grants, then we expect that to be justified very well. And if that is justified, then of course also these higher costs can be accepted. But we would really encourage you as an applicant to make sure that if you have costs that are significantly higher than what is shown for your organization and your country in this dashboard, make sure that you justify this, that you explain it. On the landing page of the dashboard, the link is here on the slide. You can find some more information on this. We'll also clarify what kind of situations would be acceptable or would be normal to see higher costs. For example, of course, if you need very senior, very highly qualified staff, of course, you would then need to explain why so much or so highly qualified staff is needed for your work. And then if that is accepted, if that is convincing, of course, also higher costs can be accepted. Inflation has come up and in this discussion also a lot. And again, inflation, of course, can be, and increasing salaries over time can also be a reason. You would need to explain how this affects your budget and why it leads to costs that are much higher than shown in the dashboard. Last word on the dashboard. Again, this was debated in the last year quite a lot. Is where we get the data from. This is really only from Horizon Europe, so grants that have been signed mostly in the last 2 years. And let's not forget, these grants are forward-looking. So the budget that is included in a grant that we signed in 23 is budget for a project that is now running for the next 4 years. So this is the agreed, what you see here is the personnel cost that has been agreed for the future. So also covering the years where we are now. So it's not any more data from Horizon 2020. Initially, in the version of the first dashboard, we had data going back to 2014. And yeah, this was criticized, maybe justly so, for going back too far and not taking into account the latest developments of salary increases. So now these data are as new as we can provide from the framework program, even though, of course, they are not data from the future. So they are, of course, historical data, but from recent history. And again, we instruct experts to also take into account that even though the data are not very old, there could still be increases due to inflation. During grant preparation, again, I repeat myself, we follow the standard process. We also apply the no negotiation principle. So as such, grant preparation, a lump sum grant is not really different. Again, what we can do is, like in any other grant, we can correct obvious errors. We can, of course, and we need to make adjustments to the lump sum budget that are the result of the evaluation and the recommendations of the experts. And then as a result of that, we will add not the detailed budget table. The detailed budget table of your proposal is not part of the grant. It is only needed for you to tell us what the costs are that you have in your projects to justify the lump sum, and for us, after expert evaluation, to agree on a lump sum. Once that is done, we forget about the details. We forget about the financial costs. There are no cost categories anymore in the grant agreement. The only thing that is in the grant agreement is the breakdown of lump sum shares. And in a way, we could call this lump sum share breakdown also a payment schedule, because the shares in this table predetermine your payments that you get upon completion of the respective work packages. So yeah, breakdown of lump sum shares or payment schedule, that is more or less the same thing. We don't have actual costs anymore in the grant agreement. All these details are only part of the process to agree the lump sum. That is also, I mean, I really need to emphasize this, that the lump sum, the idea of a lump sum is that we don't question it. Once we have signed it, that's the amount you're going to get upon completion of the work. We're not going to question it in either way. If prices for services or goods go up or down, this is the lump sum that you get. This is what we agreed. This is also in case, let's say, we have agreed to buy a piece of equipment and the piece of equipment half a year later got cheaper or got more expensive. In either way, we are not going to question the lump sum, with the possible exception of fraud, or with the possible exception that there was some gross misrepresentation. That is a different story. But as long as we have properly agreed the lump sum, so really in the vast majority of cases, you can expect that there will never be a question on the lump sum in either direction. So I've talked a lot about this budget breakdown. This is what it looks like in principle. You see a table which is with the work packages in the columns and the beneficiaries in the rows. And for each beneficiary participating in a given work package, you see that beneficiaries share in that work package. So at the bottom, in the bottom row, you see the total share allocated to each work package. And in the last column, you see the share allocated to each beneficiary. Now, the lump sum, the total lump sum in this example is 3 million, and we have broken it down into all these shares that you can see. The total is also called the maximum grant amount. So legally speaking, the lump sum is also the maximum grant amount. Now, the difference in with an actual cost grant would be that generally you can use this budget as you see fit. Now, this is also addressing this question of flexibility. Since you are not reporting the costs, and since you're not reporting how these amounts are used by the consortium, the Commission doesn't know about the usage, the consumption of finances. There is no financial monitoring for us. So we are not interested in how this cost is used and at what speed and by which beneficiary at what time. So you have endless flexibility in this regard as long as you agree as a consortium on how to execute the project and how to spend the funds. This is not relevant for us. So you have effectively endless budget flexibility. The only thing that you need to bear in mind is you might want to, if the project changes and you have technical changes or you need to change the allocation of budget between partners. In this case, you might have an interest to fix this in the grant agreement. In other words, in that case, you might have an interest to update Annex 2 to the grant agreement, this budget table. And this, of course, requires an amendment. That is clear. Anytime, for any change that you want to do in the grant agreement, you need an amendment. So this is really up to the consortium to decide and might indeed give the consortium more, a good basis for each other to trust, to build trust in the consortium and to reflect the reality of the work going on in the grant agreement in this budget table. But I emphasize again, that's really more a measure for the consortium management than for the need of the Commission. Because as long as you implement the grant and you explain maybe any deviations that you have, you will get the total lump sum. And that's it for us. So we just want to see that you complete the project and then you're going to get the full lump sum, and the rest, how you're going to distribute this and how you're going to spend it, at what time, etc. I said it, that is up to you. That's also reflected in the payment schedule, which is again very similar as to what we've seen before. So you get a pre-financing. There's often questions on pre-financing in lump sum grants. It is exactly the same as in any other grant. We have no other rules. Typically, pre-financing is determined on the basis of the number of reporting periods. So typically a project of 2 reporting periods gets 80%, and a project of 3 reporting periods would get something like a little bit more than 50%, and so on. The more the more reporting periods and the longer the project, the smaller the share of the pre-financing. With 4 reporting periods would still get 40%, which is of course still quite a lot. But the key is here, the rules are the same. The way we calculate it, and there can be exceptions, of course, but these are not related to the topic or the grant running under lump sums. Then intermediate payments, there the difference is, we make a payment at each interim reporting step, that is at the end of each reporting period. In that case, we do an automatic payment of all the shares associated to work packages that have been accepted. So you declare work packages as accepted or as still ongoing, and the ones that you declare as completed and we accept as completed, we know the share, because the share for that work package is written in Annex 2 of the grant agreement, and we pay that share. That allows us also to fully automate this process in the end. We'll come to that in a minute. And then at the very end of the project, again, it's very similar. We make a final payment that closes the financial part of the grant. There can be a partial payment. Partial payments are not possible at intermediate payments, but in theory they are possible at the end of the project. This is the case when you declare, or when we find that that a work package has not been fully completed, but only to a certain degree. That would lead to a partial payment. Again, we are going to see a bit more details. And of course, like in any other grants, releasing the amount retained for the mutual insurance mechanism. Amendments, of course, are possible in lump sum grants, and now under Horizon Europe, in a nutshell, they are following exactly the same rules. You can do the same amendments as in any other grant, and the process is the same. So here are a few examples, but they are not exhaustive. Effectively, all amendment possibilities exist in the same way for lump sum grants. One thing to watch out for is that a work package that has been completed and paid, that cannot be amended anymore. We consider that, well, that is the part of the grant that has been dealt with, completed. It's agreed. We are not touching it anymore. It cannot be opened again. You have received the lump sum share for that work package. We are not looking at it anymore. We are focusing on the remaining open, non-completed work package, and those, of course, can be amended. Previously in Horizon 2020, we still needed a technical review for amendments of lump sum grants, but that has been skipped and has been deleted under Horizon, so no longer necessary. And let me emphasize that, like in any other project, you can, of course, you can report your deviations also in your standard reporting. There is a part of the reporting template for you to report and justify deviations, and the mechanism again is exactly the same. You report, you justify, this is accepted, and if accepted, it is in a way contractual, it is agreed. So that is also what we call the simplified procedure. In effect, the result is the same as in an amendment, but is less administration. The advantage of an amendment is you can do it immediately when you see the need for change, and you don't have to wait until you report. But so let's maybe, as a rule of thumb, if there are important changes, it's maybe good to go for an amendment, because you can get the confirmation from the Commission quickly, and you can report, you can inform us about these changes immediately. Smaller deviations, you can just as well wait with and report when it comes to the next reporting period. You put it in your report, you justify it, and after accepting this, it is as good as had you done an amendment earlier. Now, how does this reporting and payment work in practice? Again, standard reporting template. The only difference is that for lump sums, a few sections do not apply. That is in particular the section on the use of resources, and also the financial report effectively doesn't exist anymore, because the only thing that you do is, in a pull down menu, you declare which work packages have been completed or not completed. And at the very end of the project, there's also the possibility to declare something as partially completed. Now, important point here is work packages are not completed only when you have a successful result or a desirable result. They are completed when you have done the work. So there is no link to a successful outcome or to reaching objectives or milestones or anything. What we want to see is that the activities that you have described have been completed. This is the measuring stick. There is no, of course, we love to see you being successful in your projects, but this being research and innovation, and there no being guarantee that you are successful, this is not a condition to be reimbursed. Neither, and that is of course true for all of our grants, but this is specifically important to highlight for lump sums, to not get the wrong impression that you need to be successful, or that you need to be more successful, or that we are stricter with lump sums than with actual costs. No, we aren't. We apply the same standards. What we want to see is that you actually did the work. Here's an example of what this looks like in practice. So you have here in this breakdown a case where in work package 1, both beneficiaries involved have done their work. The work package is declared completed. 350,000 euros are going to be paid. Work package 2, not all of the beneficiaries have completed it. So the work package as a whole is not complete. There is no payment at this point in time. Work package 3, again, is complete, and therefore a payment is going to be made. And again, work packages 5, 4, and 5. 4 has been started, 5 hasn't even been started. none of those are going to be paid. So the total payment here is 700,000 euro for the 2 completed work packages. The other work packages will be paid at a later stage. So following your declarations along this line, the IT system will automatically generate the financial statements, which will then need to be signed, but there's no filling in of any forms. As I said, the only thing that is happening is that the coordinator fills in this pull-down menu declaring which work packages are complete, which are ongoing, and potentially at the end, which ones are partially completed. That will automatically generate the financial forms after checking through the project officer, of course. And you sign these financial forms. And well, if accepted, if the work packages are accepted as declared, this is exactly the payment you're going to get. Now, a bit more in detail on accepting work packages, because that is important, because it determines the amount we are paying to you. And I already stressed the key principle: we are not more strict with lump sums than with actual cost grants. So if the actual cost grant would be accepted, the performance of the actual cost grant would be accepted, it would also be accepted if the same thing was a lump sum grant and you would be reimbursed in full. Normally, this means, of course, that you have done all the activities. A standard example I like to use is a clinical study where you tested a certain intervention. We would like to see that the clinical study took place, even in case the study showed that this intervention is not useful, not effective, and will never see the day of light, will never be used in the clinic. We will, of course, reimburse that clinical study because this is what you planned and this is what took place. This is enough to be reimbursed. There's no need to have a success, even though, I stress again, of course, this is what we all would like to see in your projects. And now, after having said that, the normal thing is to complete all the activities. You can, of course, also report to us your deviations. You can carry out equivalent tasks. You can justify why you did something different. So this completion of tasks is not really seen to the eye dot. It's rather seen that essentially you have carried out the project as planned and that basically the important tasks are complete. And the project as a whole, or the work package as a whole here, has really been completed. All the work has been done, and any small aspects that may have deviated or may not have been exactly according to the schedule, according to the grant agreement, has been explained and has been justified. So this is just to reassure you, we are not applying in lump sums a super strict approach where you have to do everything to the eye dot, while in actual cost grants we are lenient and let you do whatever you like. That is really not the case. We apply the same standard. That means, yes, you can deviate. We like to, of course, hear why you did and how this makes sense. And then second point that's important here: whenever you see that a work package cannot be completed anymore as it was planned in the proposal in the grant signed, then we encourage you to amend it, to change the setup of this work package. For example, the technical scientific developments have made it maybe not even impossible, but maybe not meaningful anymore to do the work as it was initially conceived. So you want to adjust it to the new developments, so to be stay abreast of scientific developments and make the best use of the money. We are, of course, also interested in that. So you amend your project, and this is the same as in any other grant. Maybe more important here, because it should put you in a position to show that you completed the project, that you completed the work packages. Now, of course, it can happen that a lump sum work package is rejected as incomplete. So the project officer doesn't agree with your opinion that it is complete. And in that case, you will have the opportunity to explain why you very well believe it is complete and to justify it even more. In your report, of course, you already are encouraged to explain why you believe certain work packages are complete, the ones that you declare. So if a work package is still, after your justification, not accepted, then you still have the possibility to improve it, improve the completion of that work package, and declare it again at the end of the next reporting period until the end of the project. So you have the possibility. We would like to see the full project being completed, all work packages. So if one isn't accepted at a given time, you are encouraged to complete it later and declare it later and be paid for it at a later stage. And so only if that doesn't work until the very end of the project and it is still not complete, this is the situation when we have a discussion on partially paying it. So most likely you did some of the work, you didn't do nothing, you did some of the work. So in all likelihood, there would not be a reduction to zero, there would be a percentage reduction, and this reduction would be based on the degree to which you carried out the work. We would not take into account any financial statements or any consideration of how much money was spent, but rather how much of the work that was described in this work package was complete. And again, of course, this is an exchange between the Commission and you. You are, of course, then able to provide your observations and your thinking and your argumentation regarding this. Well, these cases again are rare. We don't have many of those, and they are in the end a case by case. So there is no formula. It is really an agreement that we need to reach. But the final decision is, of course, with the European Commission to take a decision on what they believe was achieved here in terms of work done. In practice, I said it before, these cases are really rare. We have by now made out of the lump sum pilots that run under Horizon 2020, we had maybe 550 grants or so with 1,600 work packages. 1,000 have been paid of those by now. And you see that we paid 98.8, so effectively 99% were paid as declared. So you declared them, or the beneficiaries declared them either as fully complete, that was the vast majority, and they also declared some work packages as only partially completed, and we agreed with what was declared. So that was fully consensual. And then in just 12 cases, was there a partial rejection that was not declared by the coordinator, where the Commission decided to reject something. But even those cases, of course, I don't have the figures here right now, most of these cases are very small rejections. So we are talking in most of those cases here about maybe a reduction of 10–20% of a single work package, not of the whole grant. So even this figure of 1.2 were partially rejected gives maybe a wrong impression in terms of the budgetary consequences. I think what we can safely say is that in terms of the budget level, the execution is way above 99%. So there is at least, and I'm pretty sure it's above 99% of those lump sums that have been declared have been paid. So in summary, we don't see evidence that there is really an increased financial risk for beneficiaries. Ex post controls, that is something that changes quite a lot, because that's the most important thing to say, there is no financial checks anymore. That's part of the lump sum grant agreement. You have no obligation to keep financial records or records on the resources. So these cannot be audited. These cannot be controlled afterwards or during the project. What can still happen, and what does happen, of course, is all our standard checks reviews for all the non-financial obligations, because all the non-financial obligations are essentially the same. You could really describe a lump sum grant as the same as an actual cost grant minus the financial obligations. But all the non-financial obligations are the same. First of all, of course, the obligation to properly implement the action. Properly implementing the action, you can read up on that if you like in the model grant agreement or in the annotated grant agreement for the more legally minded, or for the people that have really delved into the details of Horizon more. You can find this in the annotated grant agreement. The meaning of proper implementation is essentially that the work has been done, and so that is true for all grants. Again, this is not specific to lump sums. There, the difference is we break it down into work packages, but The obligation to do all the work that is described in the grant is, of course, the same for all grants. And this can be reviewed just as in any other grants, also for lump sums. And then there are many other non-financial obligations. I have a couple of examples, but this is non-exhaustive. Obligations relating to intellectual property rights, ethics, security, publications, communication, dissemination. There's quite a range of non-financial obligations, we call them, which are related to policy objectives of the program, and those remain exactly the same, and they can be checked and controlled in exactly the same way as in any other grant. And as a consequence of this, you have the key message of what you need to keep in terms of records for lump sum grants is quite simple, even though this slide may not look simple. It is on the left-hand side is you need to keep technical records to prove that the action was carried out, and this is the same as in any grant. The obligation in the grant agreement is exactly the same. You need to be able to show with your technical documentation. I have a couple of examples here. This can be lab books, this can be publications, this can be conference proceedings, anything that in your particular case, this is project by project different, of course, that applies to your project, is can be used to show that the work was actually done. And this is, of course, applicable to any grant. So the message here is you need to keep this documentation, but you don't need to keep any documentation more for lump sum on this side, on the left-hand side here, that you need to keep for any other grant as well. So no further effort than in an actual cost grant. You just need to have this documentation. But on the right-hand side, you see what you don't need to have anymore, and that is any financial documents, no timesheets or contracts or depreciation policy or invoices. In short, you don't need any documents to show that you had costs, that you incurred costs, or in the way that your resources were used. And the only caveat I would like to make here is that, of course, you still need to comply with your internal rules or with your national rules. This is a separate discussion. Obviously, the grant agreement you signed with the European Commission has no influence on your national law or on your obligations towards the organization in which the project takes place. All of that is, all of the latter is, of course, unchanged, but vis-a-vis the Commission, you don't need to have any of these documents and you don't report on any of that. That is the novelty. So we have put all of our resources in a single space for you on the Funding and Tenders portal. It's the lump sum page, link is here. In particular, you get, that's new, a series of video tutorials. I can really warmly recommend those for people who are new to lump sum funding, an overview, how to use the detailed budget table. And imminently, we also release a video on the use of the Horizon dashboard for lump sum evaluations. I mentioned before the dashboard with personnel costs. There's many other guidance documents, quick guidance and more detailed guidance. In particular, we have a detailed guidance for participants. That's the formal guidance of the Commission for lump sums. Again, that is maybe interesting for for administrations, for lawyers. Maybe not every participant really needs to look at all those details. You can find the principles also in the overview documents and in the video tutorials, and of course in the guidance that is provided in the templates themselves. So in the template of the budget table, on the landing page of the dashboard, in the templates that you need to fill in for reporting, for proposal writing, and so on. And so in short, you get all the information in one page. Also, you can revisit past events and see what future events we have if you like to come to another training or webinar in the future. With that, just a few words on the next steps. We have recently released an improved Excel tool with improved guidance. We are in talks with our stakeholders how to further improve this and how to further improve the guidance there. So probably in 2024, we're going to release yet another version, but this is just going to be an incremental change. So essentially, this is the version that we have now. Principally will be stable. There will be no major changes except where we can maybe further improve the guidance for users. I mentioned the videos. then generally speaking, since lump sum projects are new, we are monitoring them quite closely since the beginning. We already had a study in 2021. The European Parliament had another study. We found that lump sum funding is generally rather positively perceived and popular among users. And now, on a much broader basis, on the basis of many more lump sum proposals and grants, we are doing a follow-up study. We completed the surveys recently, and we are going to analyze a large amount of the implementation data to see if there are any noticeable differences in the behavior of lump sum and actual cost grants, which we of course don't want to see. Our intention is to just replace the funding model with a simpler funding model, but not change anything else. So this study is expected before summer, in any case, in the second quarter, and we are going to publish it widely. So if you're interested in those details, that is going to come in the next months. And as an overview of where we come from and where we are going to with lump sums in Horizon Europe, we started very slowly. This is what stakeholders also expected. They said, okay, this is new, be careful what you're doing and carefully monitor it. This is what we did. We started with just 2% lump sums in 21 and 22 in Horizon Europe. Now in 2023, it's going to be above 10% already. In 2024, we are going to reach up to 30%. That is mainly due to the fact that the EIC will start using lump sums in 2024, but also the ERC is going to use it more in 2024. So not all of the EIC and not all of the ERC, but important calls will join the use of lump sums, and that brings a significant increase in the overall budget spent as lump sums in Horizon Europe from 24. Our ambition is to reach 50% by 2027. That is an ambition that is not set in stone, but also our commissioner has reaffirmed this goal. We want to go there in order to maximize the benefits for simplification and fewer errors. It is not yet clear if we're going to reach 50% by the end of 2027, but yeah, we are going to monitor, and if possible, this is where we would like to be. With this, I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'd like to thank you for your patience. I'm now handing over the floor to my colleague Andrea Kikosch, who is going to moderate the interview with our 3 guest speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. And indeed, we will have a session with 3 panelists. And we are very happy to have with us 3 coordinators of lump sum projects from Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. I'd like to welcome Noemi Dominguez, an associate professor at University Lyon Jean Moulin. She's co-coordinating Horizon 2020 lump sum project called Merging Housing for Migrants. Then I would also like to welcome Karina Dantas. She's a CEO of Shine to Europe, a Portuguese applied research SME, and she's coordinating the lump sum project Sirene under Horizon Europe. And last but not least, I would like to give a warm welcome to Alexandra Choukas, a grant coordinator at Da Vinci Labs, a French research SME. And Alexandra is coordinating CIMBY Horizon Europe lump sum project. So in the next half hour or so, we will have together a panel discussion on the practical aspects of lump sums. And if you have specific questions to address to our guests regarding their experience as coordinators of lump sum projects, don't hesitate to put them directly in Slido, and we will allocate the questions to them later on. Our panelists will stay with us for the questions and answers session afterwards. So I propose to start with some introductory questions, and I'll start with you, Noemi. Could you introduce yourself and the lump sum project you are coordinating under Horizon 2020? When did the project start? Have you been already through reporting and payments? Tell us a bit more about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, for the introduction. So my name is Noemi Dominguez. I'm an associate professor at the University Lyon 3, which is a university of law, business, and management in France. And I'm coordinating the H2020 Merging project, which is a lump sum project in which we have 10 European teams, 6 researchers, 6 academics, and 4 that are coming from the economic world, NGOs and companies. We started the project in January 2021, so right after COVID, which was a tricky moment because we had to start the project when there were still restrictions and travel restrictions and everything. So it was, I would say that it was a challenging starting point, but everything went perfectly well and was a super interesting experience. The objective of the project is to, I would say, test new or develop, design, and implement and test innovative solutions to foster the integration of immigrants and most precisely the integration of refugees in Europe. And we do that with the optics of housing. So how does participative housing can accelerate the integration, social economic integration of refugees. So the project started, as I said, on January 2021. It's going to end in mid-April 2024. So right now at the very end of the project. And I have to say that it was kind of easy to run that kind of project with a lump sum, because every time that we had the work package ending, that was like, okay, so we are going to make sure that we have the grants coming and the portion of the grants coming at the beginning of the new year. And what I found interesting in that type of project is that it's really, I would say, strengthening the ties between each partners, because it's a way to it accelerated or increased the communications between us, and everybody made sure that we were able to, I would say, deliver the documents and everything on time, so that everybody could get paid. So it was really, really interesting. That's it.
Thank you, Noemi. Now I will turn to you, Karina, with a similar question. So could you introduce yourself and the lump sum project that you are coordinating? When did the project start? At what stage is it now?
Of course. So I'm Karina Dantas. I'm the CEO of Shine to Europe, which is a Portuguese SME, and I'm the coordinator of the Siren project, as you said, which is a coordination and support action around social innovation for responsive environments. So what we work mainly around is this concept of trying to bring social innovation actors along with the other type of stakeholders to build upon this concept of smart, healthy, age-friendly environments. That is, especially in this case, related to building environments and the ICT, for example, trying to expand the building sector in what concerns smart homes and types of building environments that are more fit for the aging population. So the project has 5 more partners, and we started in November 2022. So we were a bit more lucky than Noemi because things were already more or less organized in terms of the pandemic, but they were still not very clear, let's say, in terms of the lump sum process. So if I can connect to that, for us, the proposal was actually not very difficult to put together because it is a coordination and support action. So most of the costs are a bit more let's say they are not that difficult to foresee. I think that in other projects and now with other proposal experience in lump sums, I think in some projects we really need to dig a little bit more around how to build a budget. But in this case, it was actually not that difficult. But at that time, there was not as much information as now. For example, this webinar was extremely illustrative. So it's really helpful for those who need to do it now. But it is a small consortium. We put the budget together and we decided up front that it was a 2-year project. So we wouldn't do, we would end all of the work packages at the end of the project. So until now, we had 1 reporting period because the project will end this year in October. We did the technical reporting, but of course, no financial one. And things are going very much along with what was planned. So at this point, I can say that in our case, we are very, very happy because it's really a difference in terms of financial reporting. And we can then focus more on the technical side. So at this point and in this project, I think it's working very nicely. And I'm sorry for my voice, but I'm with a very bad flu. I still hope you can understand me more or less well.
Sure, no worries, and thank you. And I will also turn to Alexandra and ask you to introduce yourself as well and the lump sum project that you are involved in. So when did it start and what stage is it now?
Yeah, thank you very much. So Alexandra Chukas, and thank you for inviting me today. I represent DaVinci Labs, which is a French deep tech accelerator for startups working in synthetic biology, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. And the idea is to also turn and try to find solutions for environmental challenges through the different technologies. And I have also 12 years experience in submission of different types of proposals to different types of funding institutions, such as European Commission, European Innovation Council, but also other governmental institutions in France and globally, such as NIH and philanthropic institutions. So I have this broader maybe view of what can be seen in this landscape and what's easier or what is more difficult to manage and to put in place and so on. So the lump sum project I represent today is called SynBi, Expanding Synthetic Biology Entrepreneurial Ecosystems. The idea or main focus of the project is that, like in Europe, the synthetic biology academia is very strong pioneer in having multiple ideas and moving through this academic part of the timeline pretty quickly, and there is a need to push it toward the market. So it's quicker, easier, more straightforward. And for this, it's important to kind of train a little bit academic world, like PhD, postdocs, senior PIs, about these different entrepreneurial aspects, such as IP, fundraising, business model, and how you can push this toward the market, or how you can easily interact with industrial players. So the project has started in February 2023. And well, it's a 2-year CSA project, so it's relatively simple compared to some projects I saw before. And the consortium is 7 beneficiaries and 7 associated partners, so it's not huge and it's easy to communicate. I believe that lump sum is really facilitating, not necessarily the process of preparation of the proposal, but facilitating, like relieving people from this stress of how it will happen, what we should put together, and so on. So as far as I had experience in multiple R&D and network type of projects, I have planned at the beginning a kickoff meeting with all the partners to explain them how it's usually done, what's important to keep on track. Even if we do not need to report on this, we still keep this on the side. We monitor what we spend to do what and so on, and what type of activities needs to be implemented, and how we can anticipate all the processes and check on timely basis the progress overall. So we deliver what we have planned to deliver. And in case of problem, we can still calculate how much we have spent in between, so we can adjust and explain clearly, okay, there has been this done, here are expenses related to what has been produced, and so it's important to still keep track of all the expenses, but yeah, without all the stress of reporting tiny budget parts. And yeah, thank you very much again for having me today. I'm happy to discuss.
Thank you, Alexandra. And now I would like to ask our panelists some more specific questions on proposal writing and grant management. And I will start with you, Karina. So you mentioned that the proposal writing was not difficult in your case, but would you have some advices for someone considering applying to a topic using lump sum funding?
Yeah, well, when I mentioned it was not difficult, it was not completely easy, let's say. I just mean it was not as difficult as in projects that are more complex and have much more partners, let's say. I think that for the writing, I would say that we tried to focus on the budget after we wrote the full concept, etc. So this actually facilitated a bit. I guess that in general, if you have some time to go through the budget, once you are completely defined with all of the details of the activities, this is, of course, an added value, because sometimes it is difficult to put everything in place with due time to devote to the budgetary part. But this being said, in terms of advice, let's say, I think of it as what was said before. If we have the opportunity not to break the work packages, I would say it is good. In our case, as I said, we decided to only have the pre-financing and wait for the balance at the end, because if we somehow put the work packages finishing in time of reporting, it would be after 1 year, and it would be, I think, not a good plan, technically speaking, let's say. So it is good if there is flexibility in terms of pre-financing that allows you to actually design the work plan as it should be, and not being constrained by the need of payments. Of course, this may not happen all the time, but in this case, this was an agreement between the consortium. It was possible to do. It was also possible to keep the technical part as the guidance part and not the budgetary one. And if this is possible to do, I think this is better for the project, because then you don't need to be twisting somehow the outcomes or the results because of the reporting periods. So I would say this is maybe one advice. If it is possible to keep the integrity of the technical plan despite the need to report and to receive any payments, this is a good thing, I think.
Okay, thank you. And now a question on the implementation to you, Karina, as well. Do you consider that the internal management of your lump sum project is different compared to other projects you might have been involved in? You already mentioned that the focus is more on technical, but is there any other thing that you'd like to mention?
Well, in general terms, I don't think there is that much of a difference, except for the reporting periods. For example, in other projects, even if the reporting period also financially is after 18 months, often we have to organize some intermediary sharing of how the expenses are being done. For example, every 6 months there is some internal intermediary reporting of expenses, and of course, in this case, we don't have any of this. But in what concerns the technical part and trying to understand what is achieved, how, and what are the results, the whole management of the partnership is completely as any other. I would say that in this case, we also have the added value that it is an experienced consortium. All of the partners are very committed, and therefore our coordination is made much more simple because everyone is committed to work. And this, of course, facilitates also the understanding that all of the implementation is working well. But overall, I think the main part to say as a difference is that we don't have to devote the same time we would do in other projects to check financials. And I have to say that because of that, I'm a very big enthusiastic of lump sums anyway. I think it is a good step ahead.
Thank you very much, Karina. I'm also curious to know about your experience, Alexandra. So my first question would be that what was your approach to selecting the partners in your consortium? Did your lump sum grant required a different consortium agreement than other grants?
Okay, yeah, as for search for partners, no, it was pretty similar to what we usually do. And half of the consortium are experienced people who have already like 20, 30 years of application to different types of work programs, FP6, FP7, and yeah, so research institutions, for example, they have a grant office monitoring deeply each change in the process. And so it was kind of them working in synthetic biology, and they have been chosen for their this type of expertise. Others are new. As synthetic biology is a new field, there are some institutions which have been set up recently because the field is kind of young And they have been attracted to this European system, European calls system, and they have been excited to learn how this functions, and they have been happy to join us because we have some vision on how to put it in place, and they just trusted us pretty much in, okay, just explain us how it functions, and we will do whatever you all say and so on, and we will just satisfy all the expectations. And this is what happens today. So the consortium is balanced between experienced and not experienced, but everybody understands what are the necessary steps and what to produce on time and how to do it in a better way. So because the reputation of each institution is also being contracted through these types of proposals and how it functions with the project officers and so on. And as for the consortium agreement, pretty much same as usually. It's just this financial part was very much focused on distribution of funds by the coordinator to the participants. And as far as this is set up, okay, there is no checkup which has been set up in consortium agreement, like, okay, you have to produce to us whatever financial reports. No, we do not want to be heavier than European Commission with this. However, in the monthly monitoring process, because we have bi-weekly calls with all the partners and so on, so we ask them to monitor the expenses. So this financial part is not kind of inside the consortium agreement, which was easier to put in place, but we still continue in real life to monitor these aspects just to be clean and easy for everybody, especially for those for whom this type of project is the first one. So they have this good positive experience and continue to apply the goals in the future. Thanks.
Okay, and one more question for you. Did your lump sum project require any technical amendment? And if yes, what was the main reason, and did it work as expected?
Yeah, there have been two things. One amendment was pretty easy. We wanted to add one associated partner. It was just through the platform. We have submitted a request. We have explained why this is important. And as far as arguments make sense, the project officer just accepted, and it was pretty smooth and easy for everybody. And then we had to change a coordinator from one to another in the middle of the process. So this is a little bit heavier. And for this type of amendment, yeah, it was important to kind of argument what has been done so far, how much it costed, so we can split this first partner budget into two and argument to the European Commission why it's this amount of money, what has been produced so far, so they can evaluate in between the already produced outcomes and so on. So, but it's all smooth and understandable. And what I wanted to stress also in general about European projects is like European Commission is not there to penalize or to whatever make your life stressful or difficult. On the contrary, it's always there in a constructive dialogue of what can be better for the project. If you need to change any activities, okay, argument this, and if it makes sense, European Commission accepts it. I never saw any whatever conflict around, no, don't do this, we don't agree, no. It's about how we can make whatever project better, how we can make it more efficient, how we can optimize the process as much as possible for everybody, and how we can produce better outcome for the community. And also one maybe comment about lump sum in general. So I'm doing also a thesis, and its focus is around impact of non-dilutive funding on companies' attractivity to dilutive, to whatever equity or private money. And one thing which I saw in the landscape globally is like companies usually are afraid of going after non-dilutive funding because they're afraid of reporting and all these difficulties in the process. Therefore, lump sum is really a very good solution for this type of problem, like, okay, how we can better attract all the community to go after this money, because it's easier today than it might have been before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And I will now turn to Noemi for the last round of questions. And so would you say that the reporting for your project become easier thanks to the use of lump sum funding? And what is your experience with declaring the completion of work packages at the end of the reporting period? And did you receive a full payment?
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed, actually, it's super easy. And I would say that I wouldn't say that a kid could do everything, but we have a platform, and you just need to upload documents on the platform on the due time, and you have some reminders sometimes. So you upload your documents, and you have some replies from the project officer saying, okay, so we received everything, etc. And what we saw actually was that we were surprised because it was extremely easy, and we're positively surprised, I would say, because when you have the experience of prior European project where you had these reportings and financial, etc., was kind of heavy. But there, it was extremely easy. And at the beginning, we were super surprised, and we said, well, maybe we forgot something, or we did something wrong, or something like that. But it was extremely easy, and I would like maybe to comment on what has been said before by Karina and Alexandra, is that at least the fact that you receive the money and that you as a coordinator, you just need to make sure that everybody receives his share of the money. It's I would say freeing a lot of time, and you have time to focus on what you were supposed to be focusing on, meaning the project itself and the relations you'll have with your partners, etc. So it's making things extremely easy. We still hired someone to make sure that to monitor the project as a project code, I would say project manager, just to make sure that we respected all the deadlines, etc. Because as a coordinator, you have a lot in mind, but it's extremely easy, it's saving time, and we have always been paid on due time, so perfect. And I'm like a bit like Karina, I'm extremely enthusiastic about these projects because it's super easy. And maybe the thing that will require the most amount of time, I would say, is preparing writing the proposal, because you have to show what you want to. You have to explain kind of precisely in a clear way what you want to do, who's a member of your consortium, where you want to go, and what are you planning to add to what has been said before and what has been done before, especially in the European projects. I would say that is probably the most important part, the time that will require some investment, personal investment, but for the rest, the reporting is easy, and it was super easy, and it was great.
Thank you. And one last question. Is there anything else that you would like to advise, in particularly other lump sum coordinators, regarding the management of their grant?
I would say that I see a couple of things are extremely important. Is I would say a regular communication with the members of your consortium, because at least you're building a team, building a group, but also so that you can get some information about, okay, so there might be something that will be problematic in a couple of weeks if we do not act right now. So I would say that regular communication is very important, also because you will have some partners that will be present at the beginning of the project, but maybe a bit less involved at the end of the project, but they still want to get informed about what is happening with the project. So you keep them, I would say, involved inside. So regular communication with your partner, also regular communication with the project officer, because what has been said before, the EC is not here to say, okay, so you've done wrong, or this is good, this is bad. But the fact that you keep the project officer informed about, okay, so this is what is happening right now. We had to make an amendment at one point, because we had to transfer funds from one partner to another one because of inflation. One partner saw a dramatic increase in terms of prices and was not able to cover all the costs. So we made this transfer of money, and it requires an amendment, so that we show that all partners agree that we, as a coordinator, transfer some funds to another partner. And we explained everything. We explained to the EC, okay, so this is what is happening. These are I would say, the numbers that shows that, okay, so we cannot cover the cost, etc. So this regular communication also with the EC is, to me, very important. And patience and communication, because sometimes, especially when things go a bit intense and everybody's getting tired, then sometimes you have some dramas happening, like not in TV shows, but I'm just making fun. But sometimes it requires a bit of patience to really understand what is situation, what is going on, and to fully understand the situation before being able to act. So I would say these would be my three comments and three recommendations. And maybe one last, if I may, for the maybe writing the proposal, do not hesitate to contact prior I would say H2020 coordinators, so that they can give you some tips also on how to write the proposal, and get support from maybe some institutions that are used in universities. Very often you have I would say a department that is here to help responding to or submitting proposal. Do not hesitate to contact them, because they are used to help researchers building these proposals, and there are some tips on how to write, how to explain the proposal, and I would say building the budget in the end is a very, very good recommendation.
Thank you very much, Noemi, and thanks to all again for the discussions, for your contributions. I would also like to remind you that you have the possibility to ask as well questions in Slido, or to vote some other questions. So you can also use that. And I would now propose to move on with our agenda and start looking at the questions from Slido.
So I think, as we said, we are going to go through these questions by popularity. So yeah, I think there's as we said before, it would be very good to involve our guest speakers as much as possible to benefit from their practical experience. But now the first question is really very much an administrative question. So let me answer that one quickly. The first point I really like to highlight is it is the same. So, and what means the same as for all other Horizon Europe grants? It means, yes, the pre-financing is fixed in that it is agreed in the grant agreement. There is a general rule for it. Now, but this general rule can, in certain cases, it is not legally fixed, let's say. So there is a general rule. The general rule is that you get 160% of the full grant amount divided by the number of reporting periods, with the exception that in case you have one only reporting period, the pre-financing is 80%. Otherwise, this rule applies. 160% divided by the number of reporting periods. So you get 80% for a project with 2 reporting periods, 53% for a project with 3 reporting periods, and so on. That is the general rule. There can be exceptions, but I think really most of our project went ahead with this rule, and well, then the amount is fixed in your grant agreement. I hope this answers it. Next question. How do we justify the completion of a work package with deliverables submitted and milestones achieved? No, I think here again, I mean, the measuring stick is that you did the work. Well, milestones don't need to be achieved as such, but if, let's say, you have objectives, you have milestones, you have deliverables, you have tasks, there is a certain structure to your work plan. And wherever this work plan contains activities to be done, reports to be submitted, of course, we'd like to see you to send these reports to us to do this work. But you don't need to be successful in those deliverables, objectives, milestones, tasks. That is so. And what you need to justify, in other words, you need to explain that the work in that work package was done, possibly despite the fact that the objectives linked to that work package were not achieved. That is what you have to tell. Maybe here we can give back to our guest speakers who have reported work packages. How did you explain when you declared a work package is completed? What did you include in your report? I'm not sure if any of you would like to step in.
Well, if I may, very quickly, I guess a lot of the things you already said, but in general, in the report, we explained the work done by task and in general how the work package was delivered and if it responded to the objectives and the impact that was expected. And then, of course, we have the more tangible measures that go from deliverables, but also to events, to specific publications we may have had, and of course the milestones, etc. But in general, we have this narrative of what was done, and then a number of evidence of the work that can go beyond deliverables and milestones and to a lot of the other activities that are foreseen in the project. In our case as a CSA, more connected to events, publications, etc. But in other cases, it may be clinical trials or surveys, whatever. I think we need to put a bit of the context and then the evidence, and not necessarily only the deliverables or the milestones that are in the portal, so that the evaluators can also understand what was done and in practical terms see that it was delivered, whether achieved or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any other voices on this. Otherwise, we go to the next question. So, can you be more specific about timesheets? Do we have to keep them or not? In a case of audit, will we be asked for timesheets? And here the answer is quite simple and straightforward. No, you don't have to keep timesheets as far as this contract is concerned. So you don't have to keep timesheets for the European Commission services. Vis-a-vis the Commission, this doesn't exist and you don't have to have it. Now, in many discussions with stakeholders, I found that some stakeholders say, well, we have timesheets for our own processes. Well, that's a totally different thing. Of course, if they introduced timesheets, I also heard that some, let's say, university administrations, they introduced timesheets with a framework program some time ago, and now they got used to it. They like to use them for their own management purposes. That is all very well, but that has then nothing to do with the requirements we have. That is a decision the organizations take themselves for their internal processes. We, of course, my message would be, well, you don't have to have them for us. Well, unless you are certain that you need it for your internal process for yourself, you don't need it. So that's really goes back to each organization to decide, does it really make sense to still have timesheets for lump sum projects when we don't need them contractually anymore? But that's we are not interfering in that. The message here is very clear. You don't need them as far as the contract, the grant agreement is concerned that you have with us. You will not be audited on this. So I don't think we need other voices on this question. We can go to the next.
I can take the next one. It is then recommendable to break the work plan in numerous work packages to ensure liquidity for the company. How many work packages are recommended? 5, 6 work packages may not work for this. So again, I would like to highlight that splitting the work plan is it a possibility that you have, so it's not mandatory, and we usually advise this for projects with that last for a longer time. For example, for projects with more than 2 reporting periods. And we don't have a number, an exact number of work packages that you should have. So this is it depends on the nature of your project. So it depends on every proposal. And I think here I would like to hear also the experience of our speakers, of our guest speakers.
I can start if you wish. So, for example, in ACSA, we had 80% pre-financing, 75% if we take out the guarantee fund, 5%. This was pretty generous, and this allowed us to explain to all the consortium, like, okay, we prefer not to split it into different work packages. It will just go through the whole project duration. And everybody agreed because, yeah, it's feasible and there is no impact on the cash flow and so on. And now we are working with multiple EIC accelerator projects. So starting from this year, they passed to this lump sum management type. And the companies, so we kind of have a dialogue with different clients. Okay, what would you prefer? Here is this option, here is that option. Do you prefer to take it and keep the management easier somehow, not to add this complexity of having multiple work packages and so to do the same thing? And they still prefer this liquidity and more cash flow. They prefer to keep to split it into 2 work packages, for example, even for 2-year project, like first year and second year, just to assure that they have maximum money as soon as possible. So, but this is their choice. It's not like I believe this is just to start to test this lump sum, and after a couple of years, after a couple of maybe 3-4 years, we will see better. Like, is there a true impact on this, or is it okay to keep it just 1 work package through the whole duration of the project, and it's okay already? And I believe it also depends on how much expenses you anticipate at the beginning of the project versus at the end. So if you consider like the majority of the work will be done at the beginning, then yeah, potentially you need to split it into 2, so you're not out of cash at the end of the first period. But if you kind of plan that, okay, at the beginning there will be some time, we prepare some whatever, not cash intensive activities at the beginning, but that in the end of the project, like second year, you have the majority of expenses, then maybe you prefer to, okay, keep it 1 work package through the whole duration of the project. I'm not sure if I'm clear. Let me know.
I think this is illustrating it very well. I mean, we can maybe summarize that the whole mechanism of splitting lump sums was introduced, of splitting work packages, was introduced to give you the opportunity to have a cash flow that is as close as possible to the same project had it been financed under actual costs. Because with actual costs, you would of course also have a payment at the end of each reporting period for the cost that you have incurred until then. So, and this basically gives you the opportunity to design your project in very much the same way, but at the same time, we issue a little warning, a little cautioning. Don't overdo it with the splitting, because that indeed adds complexity. We don't want to see a huge number of tiny work packages. Each work package in the end still needs to make sense as a subdivision of this project, and the work packages need to add up to a efficient work plan. That you need to bear in mind. And I think this is the guidance we can provide here. And I think the experience that we just heard illustrates this as well. Maybe it is always possible and it's your choice to split work packages, but yeah, there are consequences in let's say another layer of management that you then have that comes with it if you have many work packages. So the starting point should probably be you do exactly what you would do in an actual cost project, and then maybe cautiously you can split one or other work package where it really makes sense and where it really also changes your cash flow. Okay.
Maybe if I may add just something, if you decide to split work packages, it has to make sense, because for example, in the H2020, we have 9 work packages, and as you said, it's adding complexity in terms of management, in terms of everything. But we need, I would say, we needed to have like small teams, okay, working at sometimes they were working at the same time. It was not exactly the same persons, but so that in order to make sure that everybody was able to work and that the project could go along and could move on, I would say we had to split into 9 work packages, but it's kind of complex to manage. So I would say if you can keep it small, then it's better.
Maybe the next question for Andrea.
Yes, how do the pre-financing and lump sum payments align? Is the amount of pre-financing received deducted from the first lump sum payment? Well, again, here the first thing to say is that the scheme of payments is the same as for actual cost grounds. So indeed, you have the pre-financing, then the interim payment or if the project is really short of the final payment. And we do have a ceiling of 90% at interim payments. So at interim payments, you won't receive more than 90% of your lump sum grant as a whole. So this is the only case. And at the final payment, you'll receive the remaining of the balance. So this really works in the same way as for any other grant.
Yeah, meaning that if you had this very, very large pre-financing of 80%, obviously any intermediate payments will be quite small because, yeah, indeed, of course, the pre-financing is taken into account. Good. I think we can go to the next. Where does responsibility and liability lie for the work packages? Now, that question is quite easy, but for the whole consortium. The consortium in any of our grants is collectively responsible to deliver and to carry out the grant. And in case you have a non-performer, first of all, the consequences are the same as well as in any other grant. The consortium being collectively responsible, they can decide to exclude the non-performer so that, well, and really exclude that non-performer from the project. That is what you, the processes and the basis for that is what you should describe in your consortium agreement, because that is not for the Commission to decide. Now, what happens in case we really need to deduce money? In other words, at the very end of the project, we don't pay because of a case of non-performance. We give some examples of that in our lump sum guidance. And well, there can either be the case that we deduce the work package as a whole, in which case the liability is exactly proportionate to the share of each participant working in that work package. So imagine you have work package 1 with 2 beneficiaries working in it. The liability of, let's say, this work package not being paid falls to these 2 beneficiaries, and according to the share they have in that work package. That is fixed in the financial annex. That is scenario 1. That is in case we just observe this work package has not been completed and we need to deduce it. Then we would, in other words, if there is, I can also maybe put it more simply, if we do a 20% reduction of that work package, we would reduce 20% of the first beneficiary and 20% of the second beneficiary in that work package. There can also be the case that it is obvious and clear from your reporting and from the description which beneficiary is liable, is responsible for the non-delivery. So in that case, we can also decide to assign the full reduction to that one beneficiary. In other words, the 20% reduction of that work package is put on one beneficiary only because it's clear that they are responsible for the non-performance. Now, this may or may not always be possible to establish beyond doubt, and therefore, but if it is clear, then we would indeed do the reduction at the level of a beneficiary as well. Well, and then how the funds are distributed as a result of non-performance or conflict, let's say, in the consortium, this is, I see no difference between lump sums and actual costs. So here, maybe it's good to hear some practitioners, what they think. I mean, seemingly these projects have run rather smoothly so far without a hell of a lot of conflict, but this is, of course, what can happen in a project, and you can have non-performers. I'm not sure if we have any views from our guests, from our practitioners on how to deal with that.
It didn't happen to us, but I anticipate if there have been some partner not doing the job, I would discuss with the consortium first, like, okay, can we redistribute the task as what's proposed in the question? And if everybody agrees on who can take what part of job, we would ask for an amendment to the European Commission, like, okay, there is one partner who cannot just do this or that portion of the work because of, I don't know, maybe they have internally some administrative changes and people leave in the institution or for whatever other reason. Maybe it's not priority for them anymore to do this type of thing. And then I anticipate Commission would listen like, okay, who will be in charge of this task then? That this partner has necessary competencies and tributaries available and so on, and what it would mean for the project is any delay you anticipate due to this situation. So this all different aspects should be discussed, and at the end, I believe it would be accepted as a change, an amendment to put in place.
I confirm. If the consortium agrees on a way out of that situation, I would imagine the Commission would always accept that if that is a reasonable plan to deal with that problem that one partner, for whatever reason, that is indeed then not even the most important question, why they are not performing, but there's a fact they are not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And you are shifting, and the consortium is collectively responsible to carry out the project. So they need to find a solution how to do that. If there is a reasonable solution on the table, including redistribution of funds, that I think indeed would be accepted. So I hope we covered that question. Next question. If at the end of the project, the beneficiary finds out that a significant amount of money was saved, would the EC reassess the funding and request a transfer? No, I mean, there's a simple answer. As we said, we are not revisiting the lump sum. So your project is really safe in this regard. We are not going to look at that. What could happen, but that is then at the global level, that if there is information that indeed there is overfunding through lump sums. I think this is clearly not the case so far. Also, if we compare with the funding level in actual costs, this is all very similar. And the feedback that we get from most is rather that our projects are that consortia are sort of, if anything, they are short for money at the end of the project. So they spend basically the whole maximum amount in all our grants, more or less to the maximum, indicating that this scenario, that a beneficiary or the consortium as a whole saves a hell of a lot of money and still carries out the project in full, that is a rare exception. But if there is information to show that indeed there is too much money in general in lump sum grants, then this could have global consequences, and we would basically then take measures to reduce the overall funding from the start. But we wouldn't, for this individual project, have any consequences. Next question. Maybe Andrea, you want to take this?
Sure. So where can we find the written information about the duration, number of reporting periods to design the project with matching length of work packages? I would like to first mention that we have also an FAQ on the reporting periods for a lump sum grant. Normally the standard reporting period in Horizon Europe grant is 18 months, but of course this may vary depending on the project, and the reporting periods are set during grant agreement preparation step together with your project officer. Of course, you can already maybe express your preference for the duration and the number of reporting periods. And then you will decide on this during before the grant is signed. And yes, so please check our also the FAQs part on the lump sum page, and also read the guidance on this, and you should be covered.
I can comment a little bit. So while preparing our proposal, we have anticipated 2 periods. So 1 year, the first year, and the second year. And then during the grant agreement negotiation, the European Commission proposed us to have 1 period. So from month 1 to month 24. And to simplify a little bit, because we had multiple deliverables, like per type of activity, a deliverable, type of activity, a deliverable. And the Commission has proposed to us to have like 1 grouped technical report, and inside this report to have this, that different aspects. So it was simplifying compared to what we have anticipated while we were writing. So this was good news to us too. Like, okay, we have to do the same thing, but it will be all grouped somehow. And yeah, I believe now is easier for us and for the Commission to follow up.
Good. I think we can go to the next question. Indeed, I can encourage, if you have specific questions that you don't find immediately in the general guidance, do explore our frequently asked question section. And there is a way to get only the frequently asked questions for lump sums if you go through the lump sum page that was in the presentation and the slides at the end. Next question is, we are part of a lump sum grant in Erasmus Plus that is 80% funded. How do we demonstrate the 20% matching at the final report? I regret I can't answer that. Now, Erasmus Plus is a different program. This webinar is dedicated to lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. This is while there is many parallels, and we are using indeed the same lump sum model grant agreement as a basis, this is a technical specificity I cannot answer now. You would have to contact the colleagues responsible for the Erasmus Plus program, I'm afraid. I don't think that, or Andrea, do you have any information on that?
Not really,
No.
but
No.
I would say that the corporate approach applies in the same way, which means that the work packages should be completed in order to receive the payment. But
No,
then
but I
if
think
there are other conditions,
No, but I understand the question is they need to 80% of the funding for the project comes from the Commission and 20% is what they bring in themselves. It's the matching funding. So they have an 80% funding rate. 20% is co-financed from own resources, from own means. And how do they demonstrate that they have brought in 20% own funds into the project? That's how I understand the question. But I cannot answer. This is a technical specificity of Erasmus Plus. Please contact the Erasmus Plus colleagues. Next question, please. How will the EU Commission ensure that the personnel cost dashboard is used correctly by the evaluators and that it is not incorrectly used as in a recent call? Now we need to maybe remember that the dashboard is a relatively new thing and that indeed there might have been here or there a few teething issues when it was new. We instruct experts very clearly that the dashboard is not a strict and mathematical tool to just cut costs that are above the dashboard values. It is very clear that the dashboard is an orientation because let's also not forget the differences between different countries and different organizations are huge. So these differences is what we need to inform experts about. These differences are much bigger than any deviations that you could have inside your organization. Like, as I said, we have tenfold difference easily, or it goes far beyond that. In fact, even inside the EU, and if you go through all the third countries that are also funded from Horizon Europe, the differences become even bigger. So the dashboard is meant to be an orientation in these very, very diverse personnel costs that are funded by Horizon Europe. And I think there they fulfill an important function to give to indicate to experts and also actually to us and also to people applying what is normal, what has been signed as a normal amount per month in our Horizon grants, and gives an orientation to all involved that in case they go above and in case they go significantly above, even more so, to tell us why they do so. And so in other words, there can of course have been a few cases where experts did not use it according to the briefing. This is simply, this is unfortunate. This can happen when something is very new. We have thousands of experts, and that is, we can never, and of course we also have very, very many people managing the grants inside the European Commission services. So it's not impossible that we make a mistake. And in case you detect such a mistake and you are sure that the dashboard has been used in a way that is not correct, in other words, they have just applied it in a mathematical sense without any argumentation, then, and in fact, the higher costs, for example, were duly justified, but nobody actually, the experts didn't take this into account. That is the case when you should actually ask for a redress. as in any grant, as in any proposal evaluation procedure, if you believe there was a procedural mistake, which can happen, you can file for a redress and you can ask that this procedure is repeated or is reviewed. And this would be exactly the case here. I would encourage you to go for a redress if you really are sure that the dashboard was mistakenly used. However, I have also discussed cases, and I've seen cases where people were thinking that it was misused just because there was a cut as a result. But of course, not every cut is unjustified. If the experts look at the dashboard, they look at the costs that were proposed, they look at the justification that was provided by the applicants, and if they were not convinced, and they, as a result, reduced the personnel costs a little bit, that is a perfectly justified case, and your redress will maybe not be successful. But of course, that's a call for you to make, a judgment for you to make. If you believe that your proposal was correctly processed, this is true for the dashboard as for any other aspects of the evaluation. If you believe we made a mistake, you can file for a redress. Next question. How soon? Yeah, please, Andrea.
Yes, I can take this one. How soon after one has signed the grant agreement will the lump sum be granted, received? I think we already mentioned that the payment schemes is the same as for actual cost grants, so not a big difference to that. So you will receive at the beginning of your project a pre-financing payment, and then the subsequent payments will be done at the end of the reporting periods, provided that you completed the work packages, declared them as such, and also that they were accepted by the project officer. And at the end of the last reporting period, you also have the chance to declare a partially completed work package. But this has already been explained, I think, so we can maybe Alexandra, if you want to.
Just if you want, the first pre-financing, we have received it, for example. So there are two options which are mentioned in the grant agreement. Either it's received 2 weeks after the signature, if you plan to start your project right away, or 10 days before the start of the project, if you plan to start it like in 3 months and so on. So we have received it exactly like 10 days before the start of the project. As an example.
Yeah. And maybe to clarify, because that's not so clear from the question, no, you do, we call it lump sum, but it doesn't mean that you get the whole lump sum in one go. The payment schedule, as Andreas said, is the same as before. You get a pre-financing, and then you get, if you like, installments, payments at the end of each reporting period and at the end of the project. That is, in other words, the payment schedule is the same as in any other grant. It's not that you get the whole amount at once.
Karina, you would like to add something?
Sorry, I just unmuted, I think, at the same time. Just to say that in our case, the process was very quick. We actually received, I think, the approval in beginning of July. We started in November, so we had 4 months for the full negotiation, and the payment came right. The pre-financing payment came right at the time that it was foreseen as well. So in general, for grant agreement preparation, it was actually quite efficient as well, which of course then also implies with the payment of the pre-financing.
Thank you. So we have time for maybe 2-3 more questions if we hurry up. In lump sums, the best value for money principle for subcontractors still counts. Yes, it still applies, I confirm, but will not be reviewed, correct? No, that's not really true. Should the name of the subcontractor be mentioned in the proposal? So there the rule is the same as before. You should describe in your proposal what parts of the proposal are going to be subcontracted. And you should also indicate then in your budget planning how much this subcontracting is going to be costing. I mean, the amount that you are allocating to one or more subcontracts. You don't need to indicate, you can, but you don't need to indicate the name, the identity of the subcontractor. That depends on whether you know that subcontractor already or not. And of course, the evaluation of best value for money is part of the evaluation. The experts, the commission, when we evaluate, we look at whether the activities that you propose to be subcontracting and the amount that you are earmarking for this makes sense. That is how it gets evaluated. And of course, the obligations that you have are all the same. I mean, the obligation you're also, I think, you're making a legal declaration at the beginning that subcontracting is following the best value for money principle. There, indeed, also you have national legislation and European legislation to follow. Indeed, so we have this element at the evaluation, and there's a range of legal obligations that you need to follow in regard to subcontracting, including the best value for money principle. So maybe it's 12 o'clock. It's more or less time to finish. Can we maybe have one last question? Will lump sum funding be applied to all Horizon projects, and starting from when? No, I think we can be, and I think that's also a clear no answer here, a clear, simple answer. We are not going to apply lump sum funding to all Horizon projects. As I said, there is an ambition to go to up to 50% by 2027, but that would be, if we reach that goal, then maybe over the whole framework program, if you go really from 21 to 27 and you look the integral of the whole framework program, that would maybe mean that we have in the end spent 20% of the Horizon budget with lump sums. That's just I'm just estimating this now, but we started very little with just 2%. We are now maybe at a bit more than 10%, going to 30% in 24. If we have few more little increases in the years to come, and maybe we really reach the 50% in the year 27, yeah, then still half of the program is using other funding models than lump sums. So no, it's not going to happen. And well, it's difficult to predict the future. Some very clever people observed. We don't know that. And for FP10, I'm also not in a position to tell you what's going to happen. I'm pretty, I think we can expect that lump sums are here to stay also in FP10, but then the exact shape and scope and amount that is going to use lump sums in the future, yeah, in FP10, that we don't know. But there is, of course, a chance they are going to increase even further. But if I would dare a cautious prediction, even then, I don't think we are going to see 100% lump sums. So no, I think we are going to keep using different funding models where and how they fit best. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Thanks very much for being with us. Go to the, if you have questions on lump sums, do not hesitate to go to the page we indicated. This information is also kept up to date all the time. Use the videos. There's also the research inquiry service for you. In case they can't answer directly, these questions will also come through to us, and we will try and provide you a quick answer. So don't hesitate to make use of all these support and guidance possibilities. Thank you very much to our three speakers. That was really very kind of you to be with us as well. That, I think, also gave a bit of flavor to the webinar. So with this, I'd like to close and wish you a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.